Hello and welcome to You Should Be... You know what? I don't really like this background anymore. It's a bit too noisy. Let's fix this. I think that's better. Now to just change the colour. Yeah, I think that seems more appropriate for this kind of thing. Anyway, as I was previously saying, hello and welcome to You Should Be Watching, the first episode of this in a very, very long time. Today on You Should Be Watching the Cloverfield Paradox. The Cloverfield Paradox is a 2018 sci-fi horror thriller type movie, the third in the erstwhile Cloverfield franchise, and the biggest gimmick around this newest Cloverfield film is the fact that it just came out on the day that the trailer came out, because the trailer was shown during the Super Bowl, and just after that, Netflix said, oh, by the way, after the Super Bowl's finished, we're showing the film. It's there for you to watch, so do that. And now we have a new Cloverfield movie, like really, really out of the blue, when it was supposed to come out in April, and just goes to show that all these months of speculation about when is the film coming out, is Netflix showing it on their service, or is it going in theatres, what's happening with it, was all the usual J.J. Abrams bad robot smoke and mirrors. It's what we like to do. We're bad robot. We like to dazzle you. And so now we have this film. So what is it about? Well, the film stars Gugu mbatha-raw, and please God let my online research have allowed me to pronounce her name correctly, as well as David Oyelowo, Daniel Bruhl, John Ortiz, Chris O'Dowd, Axel Henny, Zhang Zi, Elizabeth Debicki, and some other people, only a few more. It's a bit of a limited cast, and all of them that I previously mentioned play astronauts on a space station called the Cloverfield, and their job while in space is to use a particle accelerator to provide a massive sustainable energy source for the Earth so that it doesn't run out of energy, and so that they can avert wars that are brewing and unrest that is happening globally because of the lack of energy that is being able to be provided for everyone. So these group of scientists and astronauts have to work together to use their particle accelerator to provide a source of energy. Problem is that there are some that are afraid of what might happen if they successfully make the particle accelerator work, of what sort of things could happen, such as a paradox, a Cloverfield paradox, as that guy from Gotham says in the film in his shoved-in cameo. And of course, it wouldn't be a sci-fi horror film if everything went according to plan, so when the astronauts do successfully turn on the particle accelerator, things quickly go to shit. Now, as this is the spoiler-free section of the video, I won't go into any more details outside of that. That's all just the precursor, first reel type information that you can go into the film knowing in advance before it then goes into all the stuff you'd want to find out as you're watching the film. And that's where the gimmick of Netflix and Bad Robot releasing the film on the same day as they release the trailer, that really comes in handy in terms of if we had seen the trailer in advance and had some amount of time to analyse that, we might be able to, pick apart the film and wonder exactly how it's going to turn out and how it fits into the Cloverfield mythos and all of that stuff. And that might have been to its detriment if they had done that route. So you can see why they would do this, as well as it being a big marketing thing that will make social media freak out and will change the way in the future some films will get released. It also acts as a way to make people not get turned off from viewing the film if they saw the trailer enough in advance to decide if they wanted to see the film or not, and to have it just be on Netflix where you can watch it anytime you want. Because, if they had released this film in theatres, there is quite a good chance it wouldn't have done very well at all. It's kind of like what they did with Bright. If they'd released it in theatres, the reviews would have killed it, and they would have been justified in doing so, because Bright... oh dear God. But hold on, no, I'm not saying that the Cloverfield Paradox is in any way near as bad as Bright. Certainly not. It's in a way different league. I mean, it's not a great film, but it's not completely terrible either. Now, to go into a quick little tangent that will then feed back into the review itself in terms of providing meaningful context in terms of what I'm saying about the film, I myself have been quite a big fan of the whole Cloverfield thing for it's just over 10 years now, because the first film, Cloverfield, was initially titled when it was just a trailer that was in front of the first Transformers film. Originally, the film was just called 1/1808, 2008, and it's now 2018, and as well as the fact that, oh my god, 10 years have passed, where did the time go? As well as that, the film was a pretty good time, and most of it was built into the teaser trailer marketing and the viral online mythology that was being built around for those who wanted to delve into that and have an extra bit of expository goodness to go on top of the standalone feature as it was by itself. And let me tell you, back in the day, I was really into that. Like, I obsessively rewatched that first teaser trailer that was in front of all the Transformers showings. I watched that first trailer, like, on my iPod video, that is how long ago it was, and I just rewatched it and speculated and hypothesized in my brain, as it were, and was just like, what is this film? It looks so weird and cool and amazing, and what is it all about? And then that led into delving into all the online mythologizing that the Bad Robots production company does so well when they're doing their viral online marketing. And so I'd look into all those fake websites for the fake companies in the Cloverfield universe that all tie into each other and kind of explain how everything in Cloverfield in that universe came to be, as well as also making every single Bad Robot thing be subtly or not so subtly be part of the same universe, because, you know, they really like to do that kind of stuff, and J.J. Abrams is very obsessed with making sure there's enough little details for fans to uncover if they should go looking, because, you know, him and his mystery box storytelling obsession, it leads to that kind of stuff, and it is really fascinating to delve into it. I would recommend these videos by the channel Insider Mind that I have watched about Cloverfield, which I really enjoy and really gives a comprehensive overview of all that online role-playing game, it's not role-playing game, but online RPG stuff that they have created in terms of making this whole Cloverfield universe be a thing. So check those videos out, they're really fascinating. And in case you weren't around during the time of that whole viral thing in 2007 to 8, or you just weren't interested in it and you're still not interested now because this whole franchise thing is just not something that you particularly dig, you have nothing against it, but it's just not something that you're that into, because you're not me. Let me just explain the feeling of it, of being like invested in that whole online viral stuff. There was quite a weird visceral thrill in doing all that speculation about what the film could be and what the monster in the film was, and if it was maybe somehow tied to other J.J. Abrams projects like Lost or whatever. And I would watch so many YouTube videos that would speculate about, is this drawing of a monster, is this what the monster's going to look like in Cloverfield? And another video where a guy speculated that they may have accidentally stolen his idea that New York itself was turning into a monster, the island underneath all the buildings in New York was sprouting arms, and that's what was throwing the Statue of Liberty's head across New York and all that stuff. I watched all those videos because it was just a real head trip to just fall headlong into that rabbit hole of Cloverfield conspiracy theorizing, which was a particular sort of fervour that J.J. Abrams wanted people to invest in if they wanted to have that online experience. And thus, when the first Cloverfield movie came out in January of 2008, when I eventually did see it on DVD, because at the time I wasn't old enough to see it at the cinema, I really dug it. It definitely didn't fulfill all the speculation and conspiracy theorising that the internet had been doing for ages and ages in the months before the film came out, because nothing can ever live up to those speculations and conspiracy theories. Isn't that right? Yeah. Incidentally, I love that film, and everyone who says that is shit for various different reasons. There are some people who have good arguments, and others who are just going too far in the obnoxious fanboy sort of arena. But that's a completely different topic for another video that I may or may not ever make. I really dug the first Cloverfield movie, and for years afterwards, J.J. Abrams would tease here and there that they would eventually make a sequel of some kind in one way or another, and enough time passed that people were like, it's probably not going to happen because he's he's doing fucking Star Wars, and he's making all these TV shows, and busy all the time doing a billion different things at once, kind of like Guillermo del Toro, but not quite as obsessively busy as Guillermo del Toro, because del Toro, he has 7 trillion billion different projects that he announces that he wants to do, and like 80% of them he never gets around to doing. It's kind of part of his charm, the fact that he has so many ambitions, but he never gets around to doing most of them, leaving just those unfulfilled ideas wafting away into the ether. But still, the point is, no one thought that a Cloverfield sequel was probably going to ever be made, that too much time had passed, and like, what would it even be anyway? And then suddenly, in 2016, we're told 1 month before its release, oh by the way, new Cloverfield movie, it's coming out in a month, here's a trailer for it, maybe you want to check it out. And you know, that was quite a bit of whiplash, which I say quasi-intentionally because the script is co-written by Whiplash writer-director Damien Chazelle. And then 10 Cloverfield Lane came out, and we all saw that it was almost a completely different, almost standalone story that may or may not have had anything to do with the first Cloverfield, and there were the odd little bits of Easter egg type goodness that you could find sprinkled in the film's text itself, as well as the online marketing, which even further delved into the Cloverfield mythos, linking itself into the first film. But it was just something that the fans could look into if they wanted to have that connection. There were enough subtle hints, again mentioned in those Insider Mind videos. And then shortly thereafter they announced, oh, we have a third Cloverfield movie that we're planning. It's going to be called God Particle, and it will be coming out sometime soon. And so what seemed to be taking shape as this Cloverfield franchise was starting to be built in the way that it was that it seemed as though it was some kind of anthology series, a film series where every movie would have Cloverfield somewhere in the title or somewhere mentioned in the film, but it would be an anthology thing where each story would be different, with maybe some subtle little things that link them all together somehow if you look close enough. So basically like Black Mirror, or more latterly The Twilight Zone, or just any anthology series ever. Not to mention that there are more than a few connections between the Cloverfield franchise and Black Mirror, such as the aforementioned mbatha-raw, please let me have gotten her name right, who was in the universally acclaimed episode of San Junipero, as well as 10 Cloverfield Lane, being directed by Dan Trachtenberg, who directed the Series 3 episode Playtest, as well as composer Bear McCreary, latterly of Battlestar Galactica, having done the scores for 10 Cloverfield Lane and now the Cloverfield Paradox, also doing the score for Dan Trachtenberg's episode of Black Mirror. So there's many different links, probably some that I haven't found yet because I haven't done enough research into it, and there might be some more in the future with any future Cloverfield films, because I know that there's a fourth one being planned that takes place in World War II, which I find quite interesting. So my point in mentioning all of that is that I am a big Cloverfield fan, and I'm really interested in the mythos of this universe, be it a bunch of stories that may or may not be interlinked, or are part of a grander universe as the online RPG would have you believe. And I'm such a big fan that I shelled out for the steelbooks of the first 2 movies in the series, because I just really like them that much. Out of the 2 of them, 10 Cloverfield Lane is definitely the better one in terms of like style, acting, writing, helped massively by Damien Chazelle rewriting the original script, which if you look online at like this article, shows that he improved it dramatically. And if it had stayed the way it was before it got Cloverfieldized, it would have been a less great film. Trust me. All of which is a preamble to me saying that my expectations for this third surprise Cloverfield movie coming out a few months before its announced April release date, you know, my expectations were, hopefully, this will be good. I have no idea what to expect because it's only just being released and people are only going to be reviewing it in the next day or so. So, just watch it, see what you think. It could go in any possible direction in terms of quality. And compared to the previous two Cloverfields, it's definitely the lesser of the three. To return to the Black Mirror analogy, this is very much like the early seasons of the show, where it was just, each series was 3 episodes long, and each series there'd always be one great episode, one pretty good episode, and one not so good episode. It always seemed to break up into that. And then in the recent series 3 and 4, that gets more extended because there's more episodes these days. So there's multiple great ones, multiple good ones, and multiple ones. So in that respect, the Cloverfield Paradox is one of those lesser type of episodes in that sort of anthology format, which is what you expect from an anthology thing. Some stories are better than others, and the good part about it is that eventually you can go to another good story, and you can just like disregard the one that you're like about. See, the things that let the Cloverfield Paradox down, the biggest thing is the writing, because the script is it's one of the clunkiest you're going to hear in 2018. It's one of the clunkiest that I've heard in quite a while. It's I wouldn't say it's bad. There are worse scripts out there, but the dialogue is really stiff for like 85 to 90% of the time in the film, and it feels unnatural and feels clunky, and you're like, I could write this better. Anyone could think that, but this is the product that we have, so you have to judge what we're given. So the script itself is the biggest thing, both in terms of dialogue and also in terms of plot, because there comes a point after the initial thrill of seeing the surreal body horror type stuff, after that initial jolt of adrenaline, which is still interspersed with some things that are a bit naff and iffy, the film does start to go downwards quite a bit, slowly but inexorably. You find yourself picking holes in every little thing that you're seeing because the plot itself isn't investing you enough for you to be able to allow the requisite amount of suspension of disbelief. And whenever that happens, that means you start pointing holes in everything you see, like, why would that happen? Why is this happening? Would that really work like that? So on and so forth, and it becomes distracting because they all start to build up. It's a snowball effect. It just keeps going until it's a big cluster of shit that you can't ignore. And that's really unfortunate. It could have been so much better. The premise of it allowed for so much potential in terms of science fiction-y goodness. And some of it is fulfilled in some sort of way. If you've seen like Event Horizon, you've probably seen this film. It's basically the same, just with some differences. And if you've ever seen Fringe, which itself was also created by J.J. Abrams, you can predict what this movie is going for as it's piling on the twists and the surreality of all this body horror stuff that's going on. And even if you haven't seen Fringe, if you've just watched any amount of sci-fi or horror or sci-fi horror together, you are probably going to feel a major sense of deja vu watching this film because so much of it is so derivative and you've seen it all before. Have you seen Alien? Have you seen The Thing? Have you seen The Mist? Have you seen Life? Oh, have you seen Sunshine? That's a great big part of the film's DNA as well. So those are the biggest detractors that really drag down this film and make it just okay and not really good or even great. Because as it is so reminiscent of so many other things that you've seen before, and because the script is so clunky, and because it feels as if it has been kind of shoehorned into the Cloverfield universe. Like, people said that they felt that 10 Cloverfield Lane was shoehorned in unnaturally into the Cloverfield universe. And I didn't think so. I think that film worked in terms of what it did, in terms of it fitting itself into the universe of Cloverfield. But with Cloverfield Paradox, you can feel that they reshot some stuff and added some things in order to retroactively make it fit into the Cloverfield mythos at large. But on the other side of that double-edged sword, it's probably the only thing that could have made this movie memorable and make it stick out among the crowd. Because if it had been released in theatres pre-Cloverfieldification, as it just was by itself, it still would not have been good, really. In fact, it might have even been a little bit worse if you didn't think that it was part of a grander narrative, a part of a grander franchise, and part of an anthology thing. Because if it was just a standalone thing, you would be like, well, this is Life again. Because last year in 2017 we had Life and then we had Alien Covenant, and it was all sort of the same thing. And if this had just come out by itself without the Cloverfield stuff, God Particle, as the original title would have been, it just would have been an meh movie at best and a ugh movie at worst. But tied into the Cloverfield mythos it now is. And in what ways does it do that? Well, there's the usual J.J. Abrams Easter eggs that he puts in all of his films that he produces or directs, Star Wars excluded, I think, just a bit. There's the Easter eggs of, like, the Kelvin gas station, or Slusho, or Greg Grunberg having a cameo of some sort, be it just as a voice or seeing Greg Grunberg himself. In this case, it's just his voice, but still. We also get a vocal cameo from Ken Olin, who you might know from Brothers and Sisters, or if you are going way back 30-something, which I never watched, but I know that he was involved in it, and was also part of Sleepy Hollow. He directed and produced a bunch of episodes, but also, mainly, more importantly, more recognisably, Simon Pegg also has a vocal cameo in Cloverfield Paradox, so that's cool. Oh, and there is a rather big part of the film that really definitively ties it into the Cloverfield universe, which I can't spoil, but when it appears, it really is kind of cool. If you're a fan of Cloverfield, it'll be quite it's satisfying, to say the least. It's kind of like a real massive jolt of, oh, okay, that's cool. I'll give you that. That's cool. But to leave this review on a positive note, and pushing aside the negative stuff which drags the film down, as I said, the positives include Dan Mindle's cinematography, shot on Panavision on 35mm film. It looks gorgeous. Dan Mindle was the cinematographer for basically every J.J. Abrams film, and he provides his super saturated, anamorphic look to the film, and it looks gorgeous. It looks great. The score by Bear McCreary is also really, really good. It has, like his work on 10 Cloverfield Lane, it has a very Bernard Herrmann-esque sound to it that really adds a lot to the feel and the tension of the film. Kind of adding tension where there might otherwise not be, because some of the scares in the film don't quite work as well as they should have. And that's part of the negative column. We're focusing on the positives, so we're staying with that. The score, great. And all of the actors involved, they do the absolute best that they can do with the material that they're given. And that is better for some than it is for others. Some characters are clearly there for fodder, for dying by sci-fi horror methods. And some characters get better treatment than others in terms of memorability and likability and feeling like they're actual humans and not plot devices to make certain scene happen here and certain thing happen there and so on and so forth. The best actors of the bunch are, surprisingly, Chris O'Dowd, who takes what on paper is a really corny and stupid comic relief type role and he somehow makes it work with his really dry, understated, world-weary delivery of his one-liners and stuff, that he makes work, even though on paper they don't, and they're really stupid and corny, and are most definitely not funny if they were spoken by any other actor trying to deliver them to the best of their ability. Somehow Chris O'Dowd make it works, and props to him. Give him a hand. That was an unintentional joke, but you'll get it when you watch the film. Elizabeth Debicki, who you might remember from The Night Manager, or maybe as the Golden Lady in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And she was also in Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets, where she voiced an alien, and she sounds uncannily like Cate Blanchett, to the point where I thought it was Cate Blanchett as a vocal cameo, but it turns out it wasn't. But just a little aside that I think is cool. She is also in Cloverfield Paradox, and while her role isn't as big as other characters in the film, she does quite a lot with the little that she's given, and makes her more impactful than she might otherwise be, and provides a kind of moral quandary near the end that is fascinating and interesting and dramatically compelling, but only because of her performance and her investment in her character, because the script, like I said, is clunky enough that it doesn't do the work for her and doesn't do her any favours, or anyone else much in the way of favours, and that is really annoying, but it's just the way it is. But she does great in the film. But the best part of the movie, hands down, is Gugu mbatha-raw. Please let me get her name right, because without her this movie would have nothing to it. It would have almost no soul to it, but she brings such a gut-wrenching, heartbreaking emotionality to the role that she has, that it makes this film actually kind of have the most heart to it, even if it is accidental and only because of her performance and her character's part of the story that I can't go into. But she really makes it work, and she is just so good. If you've seen the San Junipero episode of Black Mirror, you know how good she is at making you feel the feels. And in Cloverfield Paradox, there's one scene near the end where she is really, really just like Oscar worthy. That's how good she is. In parts of a movie that is definitely not Oscar worthy, she delivers an Oscar worthy performance that makes you feel all the feels that you should have been feeling from the outset, if the script had been better and the story had been better, and so on and so forth. She is genuinely fucking awesome, and she deserves all the plaudits in the world for her performance in this. As a part of film distribution history, it's fascinating in its own right. As a film, it's just okay. But you know, sometimes okay is enough. I know, like the Nerdwriter would say, that that's just part of the epidemic of passable movies. Is passable the way that I even say that word? Passable. No, that sounds too posh. But you know what I mean, that word. Yeah, maybe Cloverfield Paradox is part of that epidemic, but, you know, sometimes you just want to watch an okay movie, nothing that isn't completely shit, and nothing that's too great that you get, like, really invested in it, and it makes you, like, think for ages afterwards. It sounds really patronising, but sometimes you want films like that to be like a palate cleanser before you then watch films that are properly good, that have a lot of substance to them of some kind that makes them 5 stars worthy or whatever. Sometimes you need these kinds of movies to make you appreciate the better ones. And in this case, Cloverfield Paradox makes you appreciate the better Cloverfield films that came before it. And hopefully the next Cloverfield, the one set in World War II, will be better than this. I have high hopes. I'm thinking that might be something like the film Frankenstein's Army, although maybe not entirely like that, because most of that film is really shit, but it gets really awesome in the last like 20 minutes, 30 minutes. It's worth it for that last bit of the film, but I'm imagining that that last bit of Frankenstein's Army is something like what this 4th Cloverfield film will be. But whatever will happen, I am a sucker for the Cloverfield mythos as it is, and I will inevitably get drawn into seeing what they do with the online RPG and the overarching story that they're telling with each of these films, and however connected or unconnected they may be. It's something that I'm a sucker for. I dig it. So it goes. Anyway, in the final analysis, the Cloverfield Paradox, I would give a 3.5 stars out of 5. Maybe later I'll say it's just a 3-star movie, but for now I'm feeling generous and I'll say 3.5. That seems about right at this time. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Cloverfield Paradox. This weird movie that literally came out of nowhere, practically. And yeah, the reviews so far aren't great, but it could be worse. It could be bright. Nobody wants that again. Anyway, thank you for watching, and goodbye. Oh, hi. This is a quick little spoilerific addendum to the video, just to address some little spoilerific things about the film. And if you don't want to hear about them because you haven't yet watched the film, you can skip this because the full review, you've already seen it. But if you have seen the film and you want to hear some thoughts about it, that won't take very long. This bit is about that. So here are some little thoughts I have about Cloverfield Paradox that delve into the spoiler side of the film. So let's go! So the first inkling that you get that this is trying to fit itself into the Cloverfield universe via the monsters seen in like the first film and the second film, you get from Donal Logue doing his whole the Cloverfield Paradox, it will unleash demons and beasts and monsters and all that stuff. That's the first hint that you get, like, are they going to release monsters that are similar to the ones we've seen in the first two films? And then you get to the segments that will set on Earth, which really deplete the tension of being on the space station, but you can see why they added them so that it does fit into the Cloverfield universe, set with Gugu mbatha-raw's character's husband on Earth as he's navigating the world post-particle accelerator, causing some kind of massive destruction. And you get little hints here and there from people he's speaking to that you can't hear but that he can hear on the phone, or cryptic text messages, or little visual things of something silhouetted vaguely against a spotlight shining against a mist type of thing. You don't know quite what it is, but you're like, is it the Cloverfield monster or is it one of the alien monsters? What is it? It's something. And then, come the end of the film, who should burst out of the clouds but Whoa! Supersized Clover! Now I use the word supersized very specifically for the following reason. I just recently watched Jeremy Jahns' review of the film. It's a very good review, and he mentioned how this film is a Cloverfield prequel, but I myself don't think that that is quite true. I mean, as this is all speculative and we're not all supposed to be on the same page with regards to the online RPG and all the backstory that they are planting online that's separate from the films, you know, I don't expect it to be something that's widely agreed upon or is even actually canon. But as someone who follows this stuff semi-obsessively, the reasons that I think that it's not a Cloverfield prequel, there's a few reasons. For one, the timeline. Because the first Cloverfield, it takes place in 2008. That's the time period in which it is set. And Cloverfield Paradox is set quite clearly in the near future, but it's definitely not 2008. That would be too far back. So it's in the slight future, but it's not going back. Secondly, although in Cloverfield Paradox there is a bit of time travel in terms of the space station, as well as travelling to another dimension with a similar Earth, they've also gone forward by about 14 months into the future in the process of doing so. Even though that presents the opportunity for time travel and the possibility that at the end of the film the space station returns and they've travelled back in time to before the time in which they had previously been up in space trying to solve the crisis, and then they land on Earth and oh shit, it's the first Cloverfield film. That doesn't work either because of the fact that when they arrive back in their dimension and their time, the space station is waiting for them. They know that they're supposed to be there. They've arrived at the time in which they were previously. And also the husband is down on Earth, and he gets the call that she is in orbit and she's coming back down to Earth. And of course he's really not wanting that for obvious reasons. So if they had travelled back to 2008 to make this then a prequel, that would mean that the mission control would have no idea of their existence, would have no idea why they're up in space, would have no idea about the energy crisis or about the particle accelerator, and they'd be just as confused as the space station. And the third part of my argument is the sheer size of the Clover monster that we see at the end of Paradox. Because for one thing, look at the size of this motherfucker. He is huge. Huge. Tremendously huge. No one is bigger except for me and my ego. Yeah, the only things that will survive a nuclear apocalypse, cockroaches and Donald Trump. But anyway, this Clover monster, it's standing far above the clouds. So it's miles tall. I don't know the exact amount of miles because I haven't done any of the measurements. I haven't done film theory amounts of obsessively detailed analysis of what that would take, what size it would be to reach its head above the clouds. But I'm sure that that height, to be able to reach above the clouds, is a lot taller than the Clover monster we saw in the first Cloverfield, which is still pretty tall, but it's not head above the clouds tall. And also, the husband character says in his protestations about his wife coming back to Earth, he's like, doesn't she know about the creatures? Like, whatever his line of dialogue is specifically, he mentions that there are plural amounts of whatever these creatures are. So, it's not like in the first film where it was just the one monster and there weren't any reports of it appearing anywhere else in the world. And, most persuasively in my opinion, is the fact that back when they were making the first Cloverfield, they said that that monster was only a baby.
But one of the things I thought would be very interesting is if it's not a monster that's come out of the water to just wreak havoc randomly and kill people, it is an infant. It's newly hatched, newly born. And all the pain that goes with something being exposed to a foreign environment and temperatures and things and sounds and little pestilent, almost like ants, people. Having the knowledge that it was a baby really helped me understand a little bit more about what the creature would do. But to know that when it is screaming, when it's roaring, it's not a threat display kind of thing. It's not the Godzilla, it's crying out for its mother, perhaps. It's lost. And that was helping feed me with an idea of, okay, now I can see how we can be potentially empathetic about the creature as opposed to afraid of it.
So, if the size of the baby was just skyscraper height, imagine how big the mother would be if it was naturally bigger than her baby. Say, head above the clouds big. So, in my opinion, from the evidence that I have found, that I can see, that I've presented, take it with as much of a grain of salt as you need, because I'm not saying this is in any way definitive. This is just wild speculation, because that's what being a fan of Cloverfield is all about. Wild speculation. So don't take this as absolute fact or canon or anything else. In my opinion, that means that at the end of Cloverfield Paradox, that's the Clover monster's mother, finally awoken, finally on the Earth, with the help of the particle accelerator thing going on, and is now there. And she's huge, and she is pissed. And plus, there's probably a litany of new additions having been made to the Cloverfield online in recent months or even days, considering the surprise release of the film, that I haven't even seen yet and won't see until Insider Mind makes another one of his great videos about the subject. Whatever should happen though, these are just my thoughts about the whole thing. So thank you for watching both this part and the previous part, or whichever order you watch these parts in. I don't know. Yeah. So thank you for watching again. this has been my first You Should Be Watching episode for, like, maybe a couple of years or so, something like that. I've been away for quite a while. There has been reasons. I won't go into them because they're, like, quite personal, and if you're new here, and this is the first video of mine that you're seeing, you don't need to hear about them right now because that's not what the subject of this video is about. But regardless, this is my first proper video in a while, and first episode of this review thing, and I've enjoyed doing this. I've missed doing it, and I'm glad I have this green screen now so I can add some, visual interest to the side of me instead of just it being me the whole time, because nobody wants to see just that for however long this video is now. Probably something in the region of 20 minutes. I don't know. I'll find out in the edit. Should be fun. Anyway, thank you for watching. Until next time, whenever that should be, see you then. Bye. Dear God, I'm sweating. Not surprising with all these lights around. Should have worn a sweatband, but that'll be for another time.